Hi all, my name is Davis and welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things tech, and today is a very exciting day because we are going to be ranking every single iPhone ever made. So sit back and enjoy. And if you do enjoy my content, please be sure to subscribe and press on the notification button as well. Okay, and as you can see, this is literally like every other ranking video in the world.
You're a copycat, sellout.
Thank you, Dennis. We have all of our rankings going from S, which is like the super tier, all the way down to F.
That's where you belong.
I honestly don't believe that any iPhone will get an F, but we'll see about that because there is a ton of them, as we can see. Okay, and to begin with, we start with the OG iPhone, the original, the 2G, and I'm thinking that there's probably only one place for it. But at the same time, let's recall, the year was 2007. Steve Jobs gave that massive keynote where he basically dissed all of the Blackberries and Palm phones that were existing at the time and brought out this revolutionary device. While it was missing a lot of features, it had a mediocre camera, and also it was very expensive. I think that the only place that it deserves is S tier because it undeniably revolutionized the industry. And my cameraman tells me that when they unveiled that 2 megapixel camera, 2 megapixel for 2G, what a coincidence. Everyone clapped. So maybe it wasn't so bad after all. Okay, next up we have the iPhone 3G. I think while the 2G was technically the start of the iPhone, the 3G is basically where it sort of started gaining momentum because finally it was available in more overseas markets, it was much more affordable, and finally it had internet fast enough to use on the go. It had 3G. Despite having a cheaper build and having the same processor as the 2G, I would say the 3G very much is A tier.
Slow.
After
one update, iOS 3 killed it.
I remember the 3G was the phone in high school that I desperately wanted. Everyone desperately wanted it, and yeah, A tier it is. So well done there.
No copy and paste.
Okay, and next up we have a phone that's a little bit more boring, the 3GS.
100,000 apps in your pocket.
Okay, so now let's remember the 3GS. It came out in 2009. There were a lot more competitors now. The Palm Pre had just come out. Android was very much a thing by then. And it was very much iterative. It had a faster processor. It brought video recording. But despite all of that, I don't think that it was an especially exciting upgrade. Sure, it got autofocus as well. That was pretty cool, actually. I was literally just going to put it into C tier, and then I remembered that it introduced autofocus and video editing as well. Did it have video before, Dennis?
No, 3GS was the first.
Okay, so the 3GS was the first iPhone to have video. Okay, because of that, I am going to put it in B tier. I think it deserves B tier.
And it was very fast and had updates until
yes,
iOS 6.
Let's remember 3GS stood for speed. It was a very fast device, and yeah, updated to iOS 6. It lasted a lot longer than the 2G in this, especially. And yeah, I think totally a B tier, so well done there. And next up, we have the very exciting iPhone 4. I remember when this phone came out, it was absolutely gobsmacking. I had the Palm Pre 2 at the time, I think, 2010. Yeah, I had the Palm Pre 2. And this really blew the Pre 2's hardware into the weeds. It was just an incredibly premium device to hold. It was glass on glass with a stainless steel chassis. Some people still say it's the best looking iPhone of all time. I sort of disagree because it was a little bit thick. But despite that, it also brought the Retina display, didn't it? And the A4 processor. Yeah, a deeply, deeply impressive phone. I think there's no place for it but S tier. I am going to put the iPhone 4 in S tier because it was that revolutionary a device. Okay, Dennis is telling me that iOS 7 killed the phone, and it kind of did, but at the same time, we have to remember the impact that it had. And
Eternagate.
Antenna gate, yes, that was a thing, but very much overblown, I think, and doesn't really matter in the long run. iPhone 4, definitely S tier. I think antenna gate actually just adds to the mystique of the iPhone 4. Next up, we have the 4S. This was the phone which literally everyone got in white because obviously the white iPhone 4 took forever to come out. So everyone finally got it, the color on the 4S. And I think the white actually made it look terrible. And the 4S also had massive performance issues later on in its life. I think it was updated to iOS 9 and that totally killed the device. Despite that, it was the first iPhone to have a really good camera. The design was still beautiful and I think it had a 64 gig option.
But a tiny screen when everyone else had 5-inch screens.
Yes.
4G.
Yes, this was a time when the 3.5-inch screen definitely was starting to feel a little bit small. But we've got to remember that it was Steve Jobs' last iPhone as well. And also...
He wasn't alive to see it.
No, he was. When it was unveiled, he was still alive.
He would die one day later.
Okay, and don't forget that the 4S brought Siri as well. So I think a very influential phone that sadly became pretty mediocre later on in its life. I think it's difficult. I'm choosing between A and B. I'm thinking because of the dual-core processor, the great camera, and also introducing Siri for the first time, which was, you know, groundbreaking at the time, I'll put in A tier. Okay, next up we have the iPhone 5, and this was personally my first iPhone, so I'm personally very excited about this. This was right after Palm was discontinued, so I was forced to choose an iPhone. I had the white one, and honestly I thought that it was the most beautiful phone in the world. Coming from older phones like my Palm Pre 3, it was just incredibly thin. It was the thinnest smartphone at the time. It had the most gorgeous display. Although it was slightly smaller than a lot of other displays at the time, it was still gorgeous, and the chamfer was stunning as well. Problems, I remember the battery life wasn't great, and the camera, I think it had a purple tinge when you pointed it at a light source. Oh yes, it brought panorama mode as well. And I still...
Apple Maps.
Oh yes, and it brought Apple Maps, well done. And I think this was the first phone that got iOS 7, was it?
6.
But it was the first to get iOS 7 through the update.
Through the beta.
I just remember, anyway, I remember, yeah. So this phone launched with iOS 6, but I think it really came into its own with iOS 7 because that was finally the OS that matched the design of this phone, and it was just stunning. I think this is like a god tier level iPhone. And don't forget the black. It was a slate black, and that was like the most stunning color on an iPhone, but I went with white anyway because the slate scratched so easily.
A lot faster than the 4S.
Yes, and it was faster than the 4S. I think the iPhone 5 was good until the end of its life. Oh my god, it's so good. S tier or A tier? Dennis, tell me.
S.
Yeah, let's put it in S tier.
I think if you go with the 4S, it was the GPU was 9 times faster than the iPhone 4.
Yes, but at the same time, iOS 9 killed it because it just was updated for way too long. And next up, we have the iPhone 5S, a slightly less interesting update. However, groundbreaking at the same time because it brought the A-something processor, A6 processor, which was one of the longest lasting processors in a while. It got updated until very recently, I believe. It lasted forever. It finally got a really good camera, the iPhone 5S. We got the fingerprint reader for the first time. I think the 5S is an incredible phone. It was just so influential, and to this day it still looks beautiful. I am so tempted to put it into S tier, but I already have 3 phones in S tier. It's getting embarrassing. But I can't not put it in S tier. The 5S is amazing. Okay, I just have to put the 5S into S tier. Tell me if you disagree. maybe A tier because S tier is looking too crowded. No, S tier. The 5S deserves S tier. I'm just looking at, you know, some of the other iPhones to come, and there's not going to be many more S tiers. Let's just put it that way. First being the 5C. Okay. The 5C is not a very popular device, so basically it came out at the same time as the 5S, but it had the internals of the iPhone 5.
Cool wallpapers.
And, well, Dennis, yes, the wallpapers were cool, but you had the same wallpapers on every other iPhone as well, so it wasn't exclusive. The 5S, so the 5C, absolutely beautiful. I think the plastic design was stunning. Very much inspired by the Nokia Lumias of the day, I think. The yellow one in particular, I think is one of the best looking iPhones of all time. But again, it was only, what, $100 cheaper than the iPhone 5S. If you were buying it outright, you might as well have just gotten the iPhone 5S. And having last year's internals, like in 2012 or 13, was a pretty, you know, terrible thing. Although, despite me loving the 5C, I really can't put it anywhere other than C tier, I think. It was just not a very good phone at a very expensive price, but it was beautiful. But the looks don't make up for how mediocre it is otherwise. Next up, we have the iPhone 6. Now, this was my second iPhone. Oh, I actually have one here. I'm going to make a video on it later. This is, I just remember the rumors leading up to the iPhone 6, everyone was saying how it was going to have a sapphire display, and I was so excited for that. Unfortunately, it never got the sapphire display, but despite that, I think it's one of the best iPhone hardwares of all time.
Bendgate.
Yes, of course, I forgot to mention. This was the year when iPhone really, you know, became popular worldwide, especially in China, because it was finally available in bigger sizes. You had the 4.7-inch screen like this, and then you have the behemoth 5.5-inch iPhone 6 Plus. Obviously, we got Bendgate this year. Oh yes, fragmentation of apps, but that was hardly a thing after a little while. And we got the camera bumper for the first time that we sadly never got rid of. Fingers crossed that the iPhone 14 will get rid of the camera hump. But yes, the antenna bands were pretty ugly. Despite that, I think the hand feel of the iPhone 6 is quite possibly the best of any iPhone ever. It's just so smooth. It feels like you're holding a very skinny river stone thing. It's just so smooth and beautiful. I love the 2.5D glass. The problem with the iPhone 6 though, apart from Bendgate obviously, was performance. It basically had the same level of performance as the 5S, but it came a year later and it had a slightly higher resolution screen. Despite that, the hardware is still basically being built until today. It looks the same. It's basically the same hardware as the SE2, and I think it's just an incredibly beautiful to hold and also influential device. I think
iOS 8 was very buggy with the keyboard.
Yes, iOS 8 was buggy, but
it could even run iOS 9 smoothly. If you open up Spotlight, it would lag.
Yes, if we look at this iPhone 6, it is a little bit laggy. It's not very smooth at all. We don't have a closer camera shot for this film. Anyway, I think this iPhone 6 just has to be A tier. It was very influential and a fantastic design that's, you know, lasted until this day. Next up, we have the iPhone 6s, and it was a minor update to the iPhone 6. Basically, it got a little bit thicker, a little bit fatter, not only to solve the Bendgate issues, but also to introduce one of my favorite features of all time, which is the 3D Touch. So basically, 3D Touch, if you recall, is a feature that we no longer have, but it allowed you to use, you know, have sub-menus and effectively right-click on on a touch screen, and it was just so cool and worked so well. I remember it having a significantly better camera than the 6. It was the first year that they got optical stabilization on the on the Plus version only, unfortunately. And oh yes, this was the year where they introduced rose gold. I think that's probably the biggest impact that the 6S had. Rose gold is still to date my favorite iPhone color.
The A9 processor.
The A9 processor as well lasted forever. 2 gigs of RAM, yes, it solved the performance issues of the 6. Despite that, not an especially exciting upgrade.
Still fast today.
And yes, it's still fast today, it's still usable. It's still being updated to this day. This is probably the last year of the iPhone 6S. I think it's a great phone, fantastic phone. You think S tier?
Best iPhone ever made.
I was just going to put it into A tier, but because of Dennis's comments over there, yeah, why not? S tier. Longest lasting iPhone ever made. If you got an iPhone 6S back in the day, still very much usable now. And what a great investment, despite it being a relatively unexciting upgrade. Talking about unexciting upgrades, we have the iPhone 7.
No headphone jack.
This was, the year where they got rid of the headphone jack, which is such a shame because they didn't launch AirPods for like months and months after. So we had to use the dongle for the longest while, which was quite unfortunate. My favorite thing about the 7 was the jet black color. One of the most stunning colors ever to have appeared on an iPhone. Basically, it looks like that it was just like one material wrapping around the entire phone. Absolutely gorgeous. Despite that, it scratched so easily and they never revisited the idea ever again. What else did the iPhone 7 have? So they got rid of the physical home button.
Yeah.
They got rid of the physical home button and replaced it with a Force Touch / 3D Touch one, which felt weird, but people liked it. Yes, it got a dual camera on the Plus version. I got the Plus version again this year. But despite that, I think it was one of the ugliest iPhones ever made. The dual camera version in particular, in a light color, hideous antenna bands. And this was also the year, yes, where they introduced portrait mode, which was incredibly exciting. I was blown away by it at the time. And also they put effort into the speakers. This was the year where they got stereo speakers.
But they weren't very good.
Yeah, but they weren't as loud as the 6S because it was also waterproof. Dennis is basically scripting this entire video. So I think it was a really good phone, but probably not one of the more influential iPhones. Thing is, this iPhone 7 is still a really good phone all of these years after. I'll put it into A tier.
B tier.
Oh, okay, B tier, because
Remove the headphone jack.
it removed the headphone jack and it was really ugly. B tier. Talking about unexciting upgrades. Oh wait, we missed the iPhone SE, okay. Next up, we have the iPhone SE.
S tier, best iPhone ever.
And this is personally one of my favorite iPhones ever. So basically what they did was they recycled the design from the iPhone 5/5S. Yes, as Dennis said, the most beautiful iPhone design ever. Although I'm not so sure on that, because with the SE, how you differentiate it is either it's rose gold, it's the only 5 design with the rose gold color, but they got rid of the beautiful polished diamond cut chamfer and replaced it with a matte one. A little bit undecided on that one. Tell me what you think in the comments. But incredibly long lasting. It's still being updated to this day. The performance is still very good. I made a TikTok / YouTube short on that recently. Outperformed the 13 Pro on one of the tests. I really want to put it into S tier, but there's so many phones in S tier. But I'm going to put it into S tier. iPhones are just that good. It's like they're all going to S tier. Yeah, one of the best iPhones ever made, and a real great send-off to the 4-inch form factor. Fantastic phones the SEs are. Slightly less exciting. Should we do the 10 or the 8 first?
8.
So next up we have the iPhone 8, quite possibly the least exciting iPhone update ever. So basically this came out a few months before the iPhone 10, which we'll get to later because that's a little bit more exciting. But basically it recycled the same design as the iPhone 6, 6S and 7, but put a glass back, which really improved the styling, I would say, because the S was this iPhone 7 was particularly ugly.
Even fatter.
But yes, it was heavier and fatter. Like the iPhone 6, the original design, it was so light and thin, 130 something grams, I think. And then by the time the iPhone 8 came out, it sort of became, you know, a little bit too heavy and uncomfortable to hold. However, the iPhone 8 had the beautiful blush gold color. Not quite as good as rose gold, but still beautiful. But it was just such a boring update. I'm actually tempted to put it just into B tier. C tier? Yeah, we don't have much in C tier. Let's put it into C tier. It's a very good phone, don't get me wrong. It's just incredibly boring, and C tier it is. Next up, we have the iPhone 10. Now, what an incredible phone this was. I got the white one. Actually, thinking about the colors were so bad on the iPhone 10. I got the white one, but the white wasn't really white. It was sort of like a pearlescent grayish color. It just wasn't very bright or white or beautiful. And then my brother got the black one, and it was sort of a gray color. It would have been so much more attractive if he had, let's say, the black of the iPhone 4 series. But apart from the mediocre colors, what an incredible upgrade this was. Not only was it the first full screen iPhone, like finally the bezels were so thin and beautiful and symmetrical, but we also got gestures for the first time. I've been clamoring on and on about how much I missed my Palm WebOS phones, and finally it adopted the gestures from those. I remember thinking the transition from my Palm Pre 3 to the iPhone 5 that I got back in the day was quite difficult, because going from a beautiful gesture interface to, you know, having to double press the home button to get into multitasking, that was a real step backwards. And finally I felt like, you know, I was getting back into the groove of things with the iPhone 10. So I love the gestures so much. The rounded corners, I love them. This was another Palm thing. Yeah, the rounded corners of the screen were just so beautiful and reminded me of my Palm. The stainless steel design as well, absolutely gorgeous. I love the polished look. The camera module as well was lovely and beautiful. The camera module hadn't been pretty in ages, and finally they got that lovely little chrome detail. Face ID as well, although it was a little bit slow to begin with. You know, still fantastic to use. It worked really well. The only real problem with it was the battery life wasn't amazing. It was okay, it wasn't amazing, and the camera was pretty mediocre. But apart from that, I would have to say S tier. One of the most influential phones of all time, and still beautiful and very usable to this day. Definite S tier. Next up, we have the iPhone XS. Now, this was a relatively unexciting upgrade over the iPhone 10, but you know, there were some notable upgrades. Firstly, the camera was finally much improved and finally caught up to the competition. We also got the XS Max, so this was the first time we had a Max phone. I still believe it's one of Apple's worst names of all time. They might have as well have called it the iPhone XS Jumbo or something. Max is just a horrible word. I much prefer Plus. But what's bigger than Plus? Max, of course. Yeah, Tim Cook or whoever said that. What else? We got the gold color, which I wasn't a big fan of. What was it called, Dennis, that gold color? It was a blush gold again. It was just a really dark bronzy gold color that I didn't like at all. Oh yes, and also let's recall that every new iPhone usually has a groundbreaking feature like, you know, Face ID, Siri, Touch ID, whatever. XS had adjustable bokeh in portrait mode and studio lighting as well for portrait mode, which worked terribly. It still doesn't work well to this day, but gosh. And battery life was also mediocre on the XS. I think the battery actually got a little bit smaller than before, and I have to say, maybe it's because I never owned a XS at the time, but I don't have fond feelings for the XS.
The camera bump got a bit bigger.
Okay, apparently the camera bump got bigger too. I'm gonna put him to B tier. Is that too harsh? I think not. It was just a mediocre upgrade. And after, you know, the bombastic iPhone 10, nothing really to write home about. And now something that's really not to write home about is the iPhone XR. Despite that, I think it was a pretty good phone. So basically, it was a cheaper version of the XS.
No 3D touch.
Oh yes, oh no, I hate that. I forgot about that. This, okay. My opinion's completely changed. Thanks, Dennis. So the XR was basically a cheaper version of the XS. Did it have the same processor? I think it did. It had the same processor, but it had an LCD screen, big, ugly, fat bezels. Really ugly actually, a single camera. But despite that, it was known as the phone for having fantastic battery life and a really long battery. But this was the first iPhone after the 6S to get rid of 3D touch. 3D touch was a feature that I loved, and this is the beginning of the end. Oh wait, but the XR was available in some of the most fantastic iPhone colors ever as well. Like the blue and the yellow, they reminded me of the 5C so much. The colors couldn't save the 5C in my rankings. I just think the XR was a really good phone, fantastic battery life. I put it into B tier with the XS. Next up, we have, let's go with the iPhone 11. Should we do 11 or 11 Pro first?
11.
Let's do the iPhone 11. So this was the upgrade to the XR. Did it still have the LCD screen? Remind me. So this, okay, so this was the phone which still had an LCD screen. People were starting to complain that it was only 720 or 750p rather. Despite that, I don't really care because it was still Retina resolution. You know, you really can't tell resolutions at that point. But it finally got the dual cameras, and the cameras were actually really good at this point because Apple finally started to do their HDR plus, I think. Don't quote me on that, but this was the year where iPhone cameras actually became really good. Despite that, Apple got rid of all of the fun colors of the XS, as of the XR. And I'm like, what the hell? The color palettes for the XR was absolutely stunning, and the 11 was just mediocre. Because of that, I'm not going to rate the 11 very highly, despite it being a very good phone. I think very much a B tier phone. Really good phone, but ugly colors and not very influential at all. 11 Pro though, much fonder for this one, because I actually owned the 11 Pro. It came in one of the best colors for iPhones ever. The green, what was it called? Forest green. No, is it forest green? Sage green, midnight green, one of the greens. The green, admittedly, green is my favorite color, and this was not the nicest green in the world. It's sort of like a ugly, khaki, military, army green. But despite that, it's still green. This was the first iPhone with 3 cameras. Absolutely loved using the wide camera. Really good phone. Performance was fantastic. The speakers were really good. Yeah, the Face ID was faster.
4 gigs of RAM.
4 gigs of RAM, performance was fantastic. In hindsight,
No 3D touch.
I remember, oh yes, oh no, this was when I got a 3D touch. It got rid of my favorite feature. Despite that, oh yes, the battery life was incredible. I remember that. That was my biggest impression of it. Because I was upgrading from the iPhone 10, and that had pretty mediocre battery life, and the 11 Pro was so good. I'll put it into A tier. It was just a really good phone, despite getting rid of 3D touch, and I loved it. Something I didn't love was the standard iPhone 12. This was the first standard iPhone to get an OLED display, if I recall. Finally, the standard iPhone, you know, got reasonable sized bezels. It didn't look like a comedy phone. This was the phone where they also switched to the blockier look, so sort of a revival of the iPhone 4/5 designs. And also, most excitingly, it introduced the iPhone mini line. So it was only slightly bigger than the iPhone SE/5, and you know, it was fantastic. I love that phone so much, despite the terrible battery life. The standard iPhone 12 had okay battery life. Okay, I'm thinking the iPhone 12, while it was good, it wasn't incredible. I'm choosing between A and B tier. What do you think, Dennis? B tier. Okay, so not the prettiest design, and the battery life wasn't the best, and nothing too exciting apart from that. Let's go with B tier. iPhone 12 Pro as well. Okay, so this very much was the generation where Apple didn't have very good battery life again. So the 11 had great battery life, the 12 less so.
12, not much of an upgrade. Except
It really wasn't much of an
5G.
upgrade. Yeah, it got 5G, that ruined the battery life. It didn't get the fast refresh rate. The camera was better on the Max, but not necessarily the lesser phones. I'm thinking B tier again.
It's exactly the same as the 11, except for an uglier design. And
Exactly. Yes, and it was really hard to hold as well. I in my mind, the 5.8 inch like iPhone 10, 10s, and the 11 Pro, that was sort of like the perfect compromise. It's not too big, so it's ungainly to hold, and it's not too small where you suffer from battery life issues and it's a little bit hard to read. And the 6.1 inch that they went with the 12 Pro was just a little bit too big for my taste. And the stainless steel as well, gosh, it was so heavy. So yeah, it was okay, but not my favorite. Next up we have the SE2. This is, talking about battery life, this is quite possibly most famous for being the iPhone with the worst battery life ever. Maybe not ever, but it's got mediocre battery life. And also, what year is it? It came out in 2021, and it had the same design as the iPhone 6 from 2014.
A classic design, it's like a Morgan car.
I'm sorry, but that is absolutely ridiculous. Could you imagine buying a brand new phone that looks, what, 7, 8 years old? But I'm sorry, and it's not especially cheap either. Although it's the cheapest iPhone in Australia, it's still like $600, $700. You could get a very good mid-range Android for that much. I'm tempted to put this into D tier. Let's do it. The first D tier iPhone. There you go, SE2. You deserve that. Next up, we have the iPhone 13. So this fixes a lot of the problems with the iPhone 12, albeit being a very unexciting upgrade. It was a lot faster, the processor, but the main thing for me at least was the battery life. So the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 12 mini especially had really mediocre battery life. The iPhone 13's new processor and bigger battery really solved that. But it did get a little bit faster, but on the 13 at least the aluminium frame still makes it reasonably lightweight and okay. It also got the Max's camera from the year before, so the 13 and 13 mini also got really good cameras this year. I'm having a feeling, while it's not very exciting, it's a really good phone, and I suspect that it would last forever. I'm going to put it into A tier. Really good phone, fixes all of the 12's problems basically. And finally, we get to my current phone, which I've got in my pocket over here, the iPhone 13 Pro. Like with before, it was available in the standard size, which for me is a little bit too big. The stainless steel frame is just ridiculously heavy, and that's not helped by the Max version, which is a behemoth. But I'm having a feeling that the 13 Pro might go down in history as a bit of a classic. Fantastic high refresh rate display, absolutely gorgeous. The cameras are fantastic, second to none. And we finally got parity with cameras between the Plus and with the Max and the standard version of the Pro. The new Sierra Blue is a pretty color, not the most amazing color in the world, but pretty enough. I'd say it's a safe A tier. Not amazing, but really good. And basically, that is my tier list. Do we agree? Do we disagree? Tell me in the comments. However, what would I say is my favorite iPhone of all time? There's a lot of iPhones in S tier. My heart says SE1, like the original iPhone SE, because I just adore it so much. But I would say probably
6S.
I would probably
6S.
My brother's saying the 6S, but I have to go with the iPhone 10. This was the year where they took all of the great features from Palm WebOS and smashed it together with the iPhone. And finally, we have the modern platform that we have today that we all love and enjoy. Very biased. Obviously a Palm fanboy here, but the iPhone 10 is the year where everything came together. And yeah, so would you like to do the quiz as well? Would you like to make your own, oh wait, I forgot, yes, the iPhone 10 was the year where they increased the price ridiculously, so, but it deserves it. If you'd like to make your own tier list video, I just got the link down below. Make the video as well, tag me if you want. Tell me all your thoughts below as well. Please subscribe and like this video and all the rest of it. And on that note, toodaloo.